When Taylor Swift was asked to cement her 20-year career for the Songwriters Hall of Fame, she didn't let a committee or her label curate the list. She selected exactly 5 songs to stand as the definitive record of her work. This institution is entirely separate from the Grammys or the Billboard charts. It exists strictly to honor the mechanics of writing, the words, the melodies, the emotional architecture, stripping away the brand, performance, and production. To even qualify for entry, a writer must have released their first commercial track at least 2 decades ago. Swift hits that minimum threshold exactly this year, entering the hall at 36 years old. That makes her the youngest woman ever inducted in the organization's history. The only writer to ever enter at a younger age was Stevie Wonder, who was 32 when he was inducted in 1983. These 5 tracks form a tactical, defensive argument about her creative identity, curated to survive the scrutiny of the institution's permanent record. This timeline plots the class of 2026 standing beside her: Alanis Morissette, Kenny Loggins, and Kiss's Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. She is standing shoulder to shoulder with these creators at 36, an age when many were still years away from writing their most important work. The weight of this induction lies in her specific omissions. When building this permanent record, she excluded her biggest commercial hits and highest streaming singles. Leaving those massive records off the table shifts the focus entirely. By ignoring the metrics of sheer popularity, she forces the institution and the public to evaluate her through 5 highly specific, tactical exhibits of writing. Exhibit 1 is Love Story. Written at 17, this track was born out of frustration when her parents refused to let her date a boy they disapproved of. Instead of accepting the boundary, she rejected it on paper. She turned to the Shakespeare she was studying in school. She didn't treat Romeo and Juliet as an academic text. She used it as a tool for emotional survival, actively rewriting a centuries-old tragedy to give a teenage girl the ending she demanded. 6 years later, the context changed. Exhibit 2, Blank Space, emerged after years of relentless tabloid coverage. The media had meticulously constructed a highly specific character, a calculating, manipulative serial dater who manufactured drama for profit. Rather than releasing a defensive statement or an angry denial, she stepped directly into the caricature. She wrote a song from the perspective of the exact monster the press had invented, performing the madness so completely that the resulting satire trapped the media into celebrating their own joke. Moving from an earnest literary rewrite of Shakespeare to a weaponized #1 hit that satirizes modern celebrity culture shows a massive evolution in how she uses songwriting to defend herself. The third exhibit drops the armor completely. Antihero is her first major single that functions without any external framing. No ex-boyfriends, no media battles, no literary characters to hide behind. It isolates a highly specific psychological paradox. She writes about the internal reality of achieving empire-level success, only to wake up paralyzed by deep imposter syndrome, looking in the mirror and seeing only a liability. Exhibit 4 moves from internal confession to external control. The 10-minute Taylor's version of All Too Well serves as the definitive battleground for her creative sovereignty. When originally written, her label demanded a 4-minute edit to meet standard radio requirements. She held on to the full 10-minute draft for 9 years, fighting to eventually release the exact unedited narrative she had originally constructed. By permanently logging the 10-minute version into the Hall of Fame's archives, she is enforcing her own definition of a finished work. It is a permanent institutional rejection of industry constraints in favor of total authorial control. The 5th and final choice abandons the confessional format entirely. The Last Great American Dynasty is an unexpected wildcard that functions strictly as an act of historical journalism. She spent time researching Rebecca Harkness, a deeply controversial mid-century socialite who previously owned Swift's Rhode Island home. Throughout the track, Swift acts as an objective biographer, detailing the facts, the local gossip, and the ruined fortunes of a real woman. Then, in the final chorus, she executes a sudden structural pivot. The objective narrator drops away, and Swift inserts herself directly into the subject's timeline, revealing that she bought the house and inherited the exact same local infamy. Including this track demonstrates a pivot in skill set, the ability to generate narrative tension and emotional resonance from a deeply researched external history. This chart maps out her 5 choices, making the master plan entirely visible. Love story is narrative emotional reframing. Blank space is cultural satire. Antihero is internal confession. All Too Well is long-form documentary. The Last Great American Dynasty is historical biography. Selecting one track for each distinct mode appears calculated. By representing these 5 categories, she is framing her legacy around her range within the craft, and she is cementing this legacy during the most densely packed stretch of her life. She accepts this induction on June 11, 2026. Exactly 22 days later, she marries Travis Kelce in a heavily scrutinized, globally watched personal milestone. She is moving forward without pausing, carrying a specific pattern with her. At the time they were written, Love Story risked being too simple. Blank Space risked validating her critics. Antihero risked sounding performative. All Too Well risked commercial failure. The biography risked alienating her audience. Her place alongside history's greatest writers was secured because she took the bet on the uncompromised risk every single time and proved the critics wrong. Out of these 5 defining tracks, which one do you think was the biggest gamble? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for the full breakdown this June.